So as a follow-up to yesterday's video, I mentioned that there was a Q&A session during the live devblog with Small Impact Games. So I'm going to go over the questions here and what they answered, because there is a lot of interesting information in here. This might be a little bit longer because, as I said, there is 27 questions here that the Discord moderator wrote down. So strap yourselves in, but if you want to go and read it for yourself, the link will be in the description down below. So the first topic is wipes. So they say the goal is not to wipe the game when the game is finished, but when they hit 1.0. They say during early access, they will keep the wipes to major updates. They will be full wipes, but unfortunately anything can get affected. So obviously when you're changing massive parts of the game, they might need to wipe the entirety of your progress due to maybe new quests being added, new really important mechanics. But I think wipes are inevitable in a game like this, especially during its early access phase. They say the goal is to not waste the wipes, but to do meaningful changes, so when they hit 1.0, you can have a meaningful long life in the game. The next question was about AI. So how does AI work? So in the Navy outpost, there is squad AI. So the captain has 2-3 cronies following him. If one hears you, the rest will be on you, which explains why often you get pushed by multiple AI at any given time in the Navy outpost. After that, there are AI called rushers. So Liberator guy can be anywhere, as well as used for double barrel prisoner. Melee guy the same. So these bots or AI will have a tendency to push you and rush you as soon as they hear you. So you got to be careful, especially the double barrel shotgun prisoner. That AI is absolutely insane. Like, it's a bug, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, so let's move on. Campers, so they say these ones keep audio low and hold corners, and they should miss the first shot. Commando majors, so these are kind of like a solo boss, similar logic to rushers, but they stick to medium range. The super heavy MG42 guys, they have a suppression logic, so they're trying to suppress you and get you to have to move. So that is how they function. Raiders, they'll try to copy player behavior, which is interesting. And finally, the snipers, so they use the SVT-40, and they said that he is a pain in the bum to actually deal with, because that SVT-40 can be scary in certain situations. Number 3, 7.62 not being viable. Now, I'm not 100% sure here. I find it's pretty good. I have noticed certain instances where I feel like the person I was shooting at should have died, because I was using an STG with 7.62, but then again, maybe I was just missing my shots. So they say that's it's something the devs are aware of, and we'll be balancing high-powered weapons to be more deadly. And also they said that helmets will be more effective to lower caliber bullets. And they also say they're going to try to maintain the TTK no more than 0.5 seconds faster. Next, please describe how armor works. Does head armor cover the full head? So they answered this, and yes, the head armor covers the whole head hitbox. So even if you don't have something specifically covering your face like the welding mask has, it still covers the entirety of your head and offers the same amount of damage mitigation no matter where you get hit. Next, there was a question brought up about VoIP. So they say something devs want to try first. So not much about that. Next, space combat and pod incentives. So the health patch will register pod kills as marauder kills, which is great. Hitting a pod is hard enough as it is, and then when you do end up hitting it, it just sucks that it doesn't count as a marauder kill. They are also experimenting on looting a pod, which is awesome because you can get those kills, but then the loot kind of goes to the void. So they say it's very strongly on the radar, and they say that getting kills when you're bombarding a ship with rockets or anything of the sorts will end up being implemented, but probably not in the next patch, which is called the health patch. So moving on to sound, vertical audio. So they say it's something they are constantly working on, using Steam audio for spatialization, looking at including better occlusion, but it's an ongoing process, and I can fully understand that. Audio is so difficult to nail down in games. I'm no audio engineer or whatever, but I can just imagine how much of a process it must be to get the audio spatialization nailed down and having occlusion mixed in there. So I imagine it will get better over time as the game develops and we get closer to 1.0. So next, the Webley. So that is the handgun that was teased in a tweet, I think. They say it's coming in the proper devblog and update, so it's going to be a 32 ACP revolver, easily available, and they have an intention to make the gun good, not only be a novelty. Next, post-raid damage report. So they say not in the short term, but in the long term, more than likely yes, which would allow you to see where you were shot and where you took damage, maybe getting a little bit more information on how you died. Then they talked about rigs and backpacks. So if you're not aware, you can't take a rig that has pouches on it and put it in a backpack, which is kind of annoying because sometimes you kill an enemy and they have, you know, that nice Panzer rig with pouches, but you can't take it. So it's kind of like just a meh, you know? Oh, that sucks. So they said it's a bug and they're having a bunch of problems putting rigs and other stuff. Longer term, you will be able to fold a rig, but no bags and bags and bags. Kind of like Tarkov, where you can just put an infinite amount of bags and stuff. That's never going to happen. Then they talked about when can we buy Marauders merchandise. So they said coming soon. So I would imagine t-shirts and like coffee cups and stuff like that. But they say maybe not condoms or Major Rosie. So that might be an insight I don't understand, but still nice to see that the devs do have some humor in them. So what is going on with the Prisoner double barrel shotgun, which I mentioned earlier? So they say the AI can fire more than can be reloaded. So the double barrel shotgun, obviously you can put 2 shots in it, but they say that they can shoot it more than what was reloaded into the weapon. So right now they're super cracked. They're working on solving the bug, and they say Marauders is just a horror game set in space. It's not a bug, it's a feature. And then they said that's just a joke. So hopefully the double barrel shotgun Prisoner gets fixed, because that is like more scary than just a fully juiced player, honestly. Moving on to solo lobbies. So they say no, matchmaking will always be random, but if we have to massage things to prevent a single solo versus a single 4-man, yes, but there will not be any separate matchmaking, which is great. That's what kind of gives you the adrenaline every time you go into a new round, you know? It's always different every time you play, which is what gives these games so much replayability, in my opinion. Spectator Cam for friends when you die. One of the devs says, I think we are going to stay away from that. Leans into hardcoreness a little bit more, and he says that it could lead to cheats and exploit, and I'm 100% with that. I don't think there should be a Spectator Cam in a game like this. You should be penalized for dying, and your team should be penalized for you dying. So I 100% agree with this, but I'm curious to see what other people think. So next, revive teammates. One of the devs said, unless we can think of a really cool mechanic, we're not going to tackle that. They say, prototype a lot of stuff, play around with it. We do test out things the community brings up. They say losing teammates affects playstyle, which is 100% true. You don't have somebody watching your back anymore, covering corners, checking doorways. And they say it would devastate a solo player quite a bit, which, again, 100% correct right there. If you're a solo player and people can get revives off, kind of defeats the point of actually getting the kills. Are grenades coming back in November? So they say grenades are coming back, possibly not November. Honest truth, there was a crazy exploit you could throw 1,000 of them, which, if I had to guess, would probably just crash a server outright. And they say headway on exploding correctly, fix bugs, etc. So that's great, but probably not in November, and I'm fine with that. You know, it would be nice to have them back, allowed you to clear rooms and stuff, but the game is still a lot of fun even without grenades or throwables. The mines are already in the game, which they're a lot of fun. Disappearing items. So they've been tracking it, still trying to boil it down for the health patch. It does seem to be region and kit you're running kind of problem, which that's interesting. So hopefully they get that patched out and fixed. I can't recall any instances where I've had things disappear from my inventory, but I could just be not noticing it at all. Next, option to disable FPS limit and bring CM 360 from other games. So they say FPS limit, increased it to optimize so it doesn't set RTX on fire. Basically, they're slowly going to creep up the FPS limit and add more options in the future, which is great. For people that have higher refresh rate monitors, myself, I have a 240 hertz, and you know, I'm kind of stuck at 144, even though my computer would probably be able to push out more frames than that. So that is great. And they say they have no idea on CM360. So basically, CM360, what that is the amount of centimeters you need to move your mouse to complete a full 360-degree turn. This is how a lot of pro players match their mouse sensitivity throughout a bunch of different games, because it's always going to be the same. If the amount of centimeters you have to move your mouse to complete a full 360 is always the same. So just to give you guys an idea, not quite sure how they would implement this. You could still do it yourself technically in the game right now, just by calculating how many centimeters you have to move your mouse in other games and mimicking that in this game. But there could be a little bit more granularity in the mouse sensitivity settings, I think, in Marauders. That would help quite a bit. Next, ship customization for engines, armor, and stuff. They say more passes on the ship, stuff they are going to address throughout early access, but they can't really talk about it, so keeping it on the down low. Ideas to incentivize space combat. So This is something I've seen quite a bit. People saying there's not a whole lot of incentive to fight out in space other than just be a complete nuisance to other players. Let's say you bring out your heavy frigate and you have a howitzer, or God forbid you bring out a capital frigate with a nuke launcher and another weapon. You know, there's not a whole lot of incentive for space combat. So they say more features that they can't talk about. There are things, but we can't talk about them now. The pod thing, so looting pods, will help immediately, and they're working on how to loot pods. So, sorry, the pods will count as kills, and then they're working on how to loot pods, so that would incentivize space combat. They're not thinking one solution fixes everything, always an iterative process. They will be tweaking rewards to encourage things like extracting with a ship gives bonus XP, which is great. That would just encourage people to find their ships again, especially after you finish your run on a map instead of just going to the nearest drop pod and leaving that way. And then push people away from rust buckets as well. 95% of the ships you see in game are rust buckets. There's no real reason to bring out any other ship, especially if you're alone. Spawn points for when you breach into capital, merchant ship, and camping those spawn points. So they say they doubled spawn points since beta. Just have to make sure it's randomizing correctly. They will look into it. And they say 7 points for both ships to spawn. Competitions and tournaments, so they say not something that is on the radar right now, but could be done in the future. And CEEG is planning community events in the near future, which is absolutely fantastic. They are so engaged with the community, and I love to see devs that just they want to be a part of the community. They want to see the players in action. They want to hear from the players, and I think that's one of the reasons why I love this game so much, is because the devs are just, they're there. They're not just doing their thing and not listening to anybody and feedback. Way to extend the Oxygen Timer, aka time and raid. So they say raid timer is kind of set in stone at the moment. Worried about people spending 3 hours in mine, for example, farming if there was a way to extend it, and losing time is more likely to happen. So that right there is interesting. Is that going to be like if you get shot, you start getting holes in your suit, so you start losing raid time? Gonna have to play it a lot more careful if that is the case. Next, game lore. So they say lots of ways to introduce lore. New daily missions will explain some lore using daily contracts and Zero to Hero quests to deliver lore. They're also looking at fun ways to show more lore without forcing it down your throat via videos, Team 17 or Marauders YouTube or story trailers, which would be awesome for those that are interested in the lore of the game. Next, ship damage affecting player after engined, which means that your engine would have been taken out. So they say it's being looked at and balancing stuff constantly, so look to the future. Next, the reconnect feature. So they say, yeah, it's not currently viable, but will be looked at later on. So this is kind of important in my opinion. If you get a crash for some reason, you get disconnected from the server, it kind of sucks that you lose all your stuff and you can't actually reconnect into the game. So that would be definitely a great quality of life update. Hopefully they get that figured out sooner rather than later. And finally, firing range implementation. They say yes, they got a version working. It's another big system and at the bottom of the list. Then they talk about map select, so they say no, raids will remain random, tied to previous statement working on fixing raid repetition. Remain as sandbox and procedural as possible. Then they're talking about plans for additional prestige perks, so they say, oh yeah, only just got started on that, always going to entice you to prestige, and in the words of Met the Doc in the Small Impact Games team, you will be wiping yourselves. That is a direct quote from him. Then talking about female marauders, so they answered that on General Sam's video. I'll link that in the description if you haven't gone to watch it. They say female voice lines are on the table, just figuring out the logistics, and they tried stealing his wallet at TwitchCon. Whatever that means, maybe General Sam's wallet. So if you don't want to go and watch that video, the gist of it is it's a hitbox problem. So females, if they tend to be a little bit smaller frame than males, it would cause problems. So as they mentioned in the video, because I watched it, it doesn't really matter because you kind of have a face mask on. You can't really see facial features all that much in Marauders except on the AI. So it's kind of not really anything they're too worried about, but they are looking into implementing at least female voice lines. Zero to Hero quest line only, or other faction quest lines. They say the current one is going to double in size, but wait and see for faction stuff. They want to be growing this the entire time. So right now, the Zero to Hero quest line is actually quite long. I do believe there is 40 total quests on there, if I'm not mistaken. So there is quite a lot to do, and some of them are a little bit more of a time sink. And if they double it again, geez, there's going to be quite a lot of stuff to do. Finally, what are the plans, thoughts for console and crossplay? So they say, that is a spicy question. It is something we'll want to look at. Game preview on Game Pass for PC was put on hold. They say they're continually working on Windows 10 version and Windows 11 version for Game Pass. Past that, looking at 1.0 launch, and if there's demand for console. So that is interesting for people that might not necessarily have a PC. The game could come to console. It's really unknown at this point, but they did mention that they will keep console with console and PC with PC. There will not be any crossplay, and that is one of the parts I did catch of the devblog. They were really adamant about keeping the two platforms, or at least the two input methods, completely separate, because playing with a mouse and keyboard in a game like this is far superior to controller, well, at least in my opinion. But I could be skewed. There's probably some amazing controller players out there, but for the majority of the player base on console, it probably would be a pretty boring experience playing against mouse and keyboard players. So that is all the questions that they answered. So as I said, there was quite a few. I'll leave a link in the description down below. I said there was 27, but there's actually 32. So yeah, this is a long video enough as it is. I will timestamp everything for you guys if you want to just scroll through the video and listen to the different questions and answers. But yeah, let me know your thoughts about anything in the comment section down below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as always, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.